I've had to get used to the Instagram Live lately because I committed. I said, no, I'm doing it every single week. And even if there's 2 people on there, I still just ramble on. So I'm used to it now. Like I'm used to just talking to myself and just seeing myself.
Yeah. Because it takes ages for people to come through, right?
It's taken me so long trying to, because I've always been like camera phobic and just to try and put myself in front of it. But it's taken ages, but
it's a skill.
You've got to make yourself do it.
Yeah.
Just start to feel comfortable.
Yeah. It's like anything. You won't get good at it. You just have to do it. Just put yourself in front of it and just... I said, there's times where there's like 2 people watching and I'm thinking to myself in the back of my head, like...
what's the fucking point?
Yeah, why do I bother? But then I... every now and then now, since I've been doing them for a while now, I'll get somebody that will message and say, like, oh, I saw you one this morning, and then I went back and watched them all. So, like, you realise that it's a bank, you know.
Like you said, it's there 2 or 3 years later, someone's like, oh, shit, they've been talking about this thing forever. Like, why have I not heard of them sooner?
Well, I'll find a podcast at, like, episode 300. You know, I remember there was one, it's called Iron Radio.
Yeah.
And I found it, like, episode 300, and I went all the way back.
Yeah.
Like I started working backwards. I was like, well, I'm just going to start from number 1.
Yeah.
Eventually people...
Definitely.
Yeah.
Plus, you only need the right one person. That's like a marketing 101. Like, at one point, there was a guy who worked in Silicon Valley, and he had 10 followers on Twitter. But his 10 followers were Bill Gates, Elon Musk, like all these fucking... Those were the only people who followed him. But so he only had 10 followers, but in terms of what he posted, the right fucking people saw it, you know? So you only need one of those people to be somebody who tells 20 other people, kind of thing, right? You don't need to have 20,000 people
share it
who aren't
amongst all
going to
their
do anything.
friends, and exactly. And at the end of the day, those are the sort of people that you want to be reaching out to, anyways. Like making sure that the people that you're connecting with are the people that you want to be connecting with as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Those 2 people are actually the people you want to talk to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been recording for like 3 minutes.
Okay.
So we'll just roll into it. Are you good to go? You know what? You know what you're going with?
This is it. I don't really have anything planned. I'm just...
We're just going to chill out shit.
Yeah.
It's worked so far. We've just done 20 minutes of it.
They're the best ones.
Yep.
Like we said, conversation flows.
All right. Well, I've got to remember the intro. All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Lifters League podcast, the Muscle and Strength Science podcast. I'm Ben Ashmole. I'm here, as always, with elite strength coach Gus Cook, and today we have 2 awesome guests.
So today we have strength coach Will, and we have nutrition coach Mikki. They've come up here from Gold Coast.
Yep.
They've been in the industry for a very long time. A lot of you guys might know who Will is, competing at Pro Raw with some ridiculous total. I mean, what have you done? Like 380, 3. You can assume you start with 3.
Yeah, my best lifts are 385 squat, 220 bench, and 387.5 kilo deadlift.
Jesus fucking Christ,
That's also my best lifts too.
Is that right? Yeah.
Just to put me in comparison there.
I actually noticed you do have changed your, I guess, what you've kind of your training styles at the moment. Is this because it's almost like this forced off season of a pandemic? And
so I've been Pro Raw was a bit you got cancelled a week out this year, so we did the whole prep, we did all the sacrifice, we did all the stuff that people know that goes into a comp prep. It's quite draining, mentally, physically, all of it. And then to have it cancelled a week out was another huge stress on top of that, both personal and business wise.
You lost like 4 kilos, didn't you?
Lost a lot of weight that week alone. And it was just a stress. It was a killer. And then just after it, usually I'll take a week or 2 to get the mojo back anyway after a comp, but this was just like, it was almost like the comp didn't happen, but it was just, I just didn't want to go back and do squat, bench, deadlift again. So I just started getting on the bodybuilding train, almost get back to my roots and just do some other lifts. And that dragged out into much longer than expected thanks to the coronavirus. And it wasn't until 2 weeks ago that I actually hit my first proper comp bench, comp squat, comp deadlift again. And
feels good again?
If
after the time off?
it feels good as in terms of like joints and it's almost exciting to do, but yeah, the movements themselves are a bit foreign. So yeah, I don't know, but I'm excited because the numbers are good. It's moving good. I really feel it's going to benefit me long term. That whatever it is, 5-6 months of just progressing in other ways.
What kind of ways? Like, I remember watching, going through some of your Instagrams. You talk about some of the your long-term strategies to powerlifting success, and I resonated with a lot of some of the things you have said. And I'm in a personal belief of my is that, you know, it's that, I mean, the longer you can spend in this sport, being healthy without injury is the person that's going to eventually get on top, because it's not something you get.
Well, you look at someone like Yuri Belkin, for example. He's been lifting since, I don't know, like 14 or 15. Rate as well from Perth has been competing for 14 years. So, you know, when he came out 2018 or whenever it was at Nationals and totaled that 950 total, everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? You know, where's he come from? It's like, well, he's been competing for 14 years. He actually beat Yuri Belkin back in the IPF days as well. So this guy's not come out of nowhere. He's been doing it for a very long time. He's just now available in Australia and people are aware of who he is. So
I feel that's happened a few times. Like, you know, you see someone almost like it's random person come out and they absolutely kill it. And it's like, where the hell did this person come from? You know, how are they just getting so strong all of a sudden? Then you just learn a little bit of history about them. It's like, oh shit, they've been doing this for 15.
Yeah, a very long time.
So that's interesting. So you're saying it's almost like a war of attrition, right? Like the person who maintains the consistency for longest and is injured least usually ends up on top, rather than the person who fucking hammers it and does this lift heavy, injured kind of cycle. It's the ones who are consistent who make it to the end who are going to come out on top.
Definitely. Well, I think that was what you presented on in the Rebel Performance Summit. Was just longevity and powerlifting.
Yeah, and long-term strategies, long-term success. Yeah, and we went into mindset about it, as in not losing touch with kind of socials aspects, or like life, basically, like not having to put your entire 100% of your life into powerlifting. Like it's a good short-term strategy. It's the strategy that I used when I was 18, but right now with running a business, buying a house, we have it, but other people, but family stuff, all that stuff. Like you can't just ignore that because it will catch up, and it's a.
You have always people in two spectrums. Where you got people who are very extreme on one end, and very people who are far too passive. I mean, how do you aim to consolidate those type of people?
It's well, in that presentation, I talked about planning or periodization, about like there's a time and a place. Like after a comp, like I said, I'll have a week or two off, go out, I'll just chill, go hang out with friends, train if I want to, but not really any focus on progression, just fun. And then in the off season, it'll be, there was still some progressional stuff in there. Like I'm not saying I'll completely ignore it and get way off track, but if I miss a session here, or I miss a lift here, or I don't go up compared to last week there, it's not a big issue, and I won't just put everything on it. It's just kind of it's a long-term strategy.
Yeah.
Like and then during a prep, it'll swing to the other side. I'll get really into it. The nutrition will be on point. The stress management will be on point. Every little bit that comes into being the best athlete, into performance, will be on point then. So it's just managing it and going like, you can't be like that 365 days a year for 10 years. You just can't. Like, there's no way. I'd love to, like on paper, it sounds like the best strategy ever. You're going to be the best, but you can't. Like if you want to succeed in other areas of life as well, which everybody does, powerlifting is not anybody's job. You need to have balance.
But I also think it comes in like, you know, it's not just from 12 weeks out that Will's going, all right, nutrition's on point, you know, sleep's on point, stress is on point. Those are all markers that we're taking into consideration throughout the off season. Those health markers, monitoring, you know, blood pressure and heart rate and moving enough and all that sort of stuff is still being considered throughout an off season. It's just not so restrictive in terms of the other life areas and stuff like that. So, you know, there's like we said, there's the performance to health spectrum, and it's a sliding scale of where you are throughout different phases of your life.
I know it's a little bit easier when it comes to when you do it yourself and you do manage it in a, I guess you said, I mean, for me personally, I mean, you know, you're kind of just self-managing it. But what about when you come to, from a coach's perspective, to an athlete? I mean, does obviously things start to get a little bit more complicated and it has to be more measured. And I'm interested in some of the, I guess, strategies or systems you put in place for some of your, I guess, your higher level athletes or even some of upcoming about managing that balance.
I think it's just educating them on that whole process that we just talked about, as in like trying to first get them to set a goal and say, where do you want to sit on that? Like if performance is here and health is here, yeah, they come together to some point, but I mean, you have to bias things in each direction a little bit at certain points, and just educating them, asking their goals, like getting a clear view of what they want right now, trying to educate on like things like just concepts like that you don't need to be 1 RM strong at 6 months out. Like things like that. Like there's a million little things like that, but they're just concepts like that you need to drill into people's head and go like, you don't need to be, I don't need to be able to squat 385 kilos today. If I put 300 kilos on the bar right here, right now, I guarantee it'll be an absolute mission. So understanding that it's an approach to make you strong on that day, and it's a long-term plan to make that happen, and it could be even like a longer-term plan to happen in 3-5 years, whatever. But trying to just educate.
Do you find like how much more time you spend? Because I find with my athletes that over time as they get more advanced, we're spending more time just talking more than doing technical work. We still do technical work, but we end up spending like 70-80% of the time talking, managing expectations. Is that kind of similar to how?
Yeah, definitely. Like one of the questions that I always put forward to my clients is like, what is most important to you right now? Like, is it family or, you know, what is most important to you right now? And what do you want to do, or how do you plan to address that? And putting the ball back in their park as well. Like, don't rely on me to be the answer to all of your questions. You need to be able to come up with the answer yourself and become more independent. And like you said, like a lot of the time it's just a conversation that needs to be had, and how frequently you have that conversation obviously depends on the person and what's going on in their life and the external factors. But like I feel like a lot of the management that we do, it just comes down to having conversations and not always talking about, you know, boring nutritional concepts or technical feedback or that sort of stuff. Just having a bit of a chit chat on what's going on in their life.
We're coaching a person, not coaching a robot. I can't go like volume equals 5 this week and we're going to progress to 6 next week, and you know the same with intensity or recovery or whatever. Like I'd love to be able to just kind of input numbers into a box and it comes out as a progression, but we know people don't work like that. They have lives, they have things going on, they have stresses, they have a million different things that makes them into the athlete. Like I was having a conversation the other day about weaknesses in a lift. So like you know, if you're weak at the top of a squat or the bottom of a squat, and strategies we can use to improve that in some way, whether it's a pause squat or using some sort of variation to improve that. And then again, I was having this conversation with this person saying how like it doesn't work exactly like that. Once you realize you can't just plug in things and expect to just improve it. But yeah, sure, we can bias them and have these concepts in the back of our head as coaches and go like, yep, okay, we're going to do this for this reason and things like that. But we're coaching a person. There's always multiple factors. There's always so many. Just because a person's squat increased, it doesn't mean that this exact strategy is the thing which made that happen. There's a million different things that come into it all at once. They're people.
The amount of times, especially I find in the off season, how many times the plan doesn't work. So I've also learned not to put too much into the plan as well, into the long-term plan. I have an idea of the strategy I might want to take over the next 6 months, but it's never, it's very, very adaptive constantly. I mean, their life's always changing.
I always say that, like, I'll have a consult call with the client and be like, hey, what do you want to do in the next, like I said, what's most important to you right now? What do you want to do in the next 6 months? Who's the person you want to be in 6 or 12 months time? And then we'll plan back from there. But I always say, subject to change. Like it's always subject to change. You know, there's no concrete rules that we need to be following here because life is always subject to change. You know, like I've had clients that have fallen pregnant in the process of a bodybuilding prep. Well before the start of their prep, it was actually due to begin. But I'm like, okay, we're changing things up now. You know, like there's things are always subject to change. And I think that's what you need to take into consideration as a coach as well, as stop being so linear with the protocols that you're setting and conversations that you're having with people.
Actually, you just said linear. It reminded me of one of the things you posted, myths on linear progression. I didn't quite go into it. What are some of the myths behind it? Behind what that?
If I remember correctly, that post was more about like saying that we can't just expect to progress week to week and just continue to have this week be better than last week and then next week. But like that would be a lovely plan on paper, and I wish it worked like that. But there's all that stuff I just said. There's life. There's stress from relationships, from financial situations, from coronavirus, from whatever that means that today might not be as good as I wanted it to be. I might have slept badly. I might have eaten off. I don't know. There's so many different factors that come into making this session good. And if it doesn't happen, the whole point behind that was to try and educate people that if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world. It's about the big picture. It's that things are moving forward slowly. Like progressive overload doesn't mean that each week has to be more and less. It's if we looked at things from a zoomed out, that things are slightly headed in the right
Average
direction.
over time.
Yeah, it's a consistency thing. I always use the analogy of like a train. Like we're trying to build up momentum, and if there's a little bit of a bump on the track or a little bit of something that's in the road, we're going to smash through that. All good. Might slow us down a little. It's a little speed bump, but it's nothing. We'll keep going.
To be fair, the sport of powerlifting is a 1% sport, right? Like at the top level, at your level, the 1% mean the difference between success and failure, right? So, and in most other sports, say skill sports, team sports, you can get away with the 1% and make up for the other areas. In this sport, if one little thing knocks you off that 1%, that's the difference between your total, like 10 kilos on a total, for instance, or whatever. Like it can be that way. So every little thing does matter. Do you know what I mean? I think you can get away with it in other sports a bit more.
It's still over time. It's still a long-term thing. Like just because I screw something up little now on, like we were just saying before, people have long careers in powerlifting. Well, they can.
Hopefully they do. Hopefully they don't come in and out in 12 months.
If I play football, you lose that explosiveness. You lose it all a lot quicker.
Yeah, 100%.
And you don't lose that slow strength that we need for decades.
But I think that also comes down to the fact that they're performing week in, week out in sports like rugby league and stuff. Whereas in powerlifting, you do it at, say, on average 2 or 3 times a year. Sometimes more if you're newer because you're still learning to express that skill. So you can get away with doing it more regularly. But for the most part, the guys at the top are only doing it sort of once or twice a year.
Keeping that perspective on that kind of time frame is a skill in itself, right? Like, not getting too ahead of yourself. We were talking with Fuzzy about that last time, weren't we? About people, the effects of social media, and everybody thinks they've got to 1 rep max every week for Instagram, basically, and people are basically fucking themselves over.
We discussed how it's kind of changed the culture and attitude towards people's training and training choices, and I guess their idea behind what they should be able to achieve. Because it was very different when I was like first doing it, and social media was like not that big. And then now it's driven so much harder to be bigger, faster, stronger, and all the time.
Red plates, all the time. Plates every week.
Yeah, well, you got like if you didn't have social media and you were training at your gym, then you focus on yourself because it's much less competitive, almost like it's just you progressing. Whereas right now, if Larry Wills hits a PB, I'm probably seeing it within 10 minutes of him doing it. So you know what I mean? It's easy to get like distracted by all these guys doing crazy shit, and it kind of make you feel a bit shit. You know what I mean? Like you're seeing all these crazy people do big things, and you want to keep up. So I get it. It's it's tough. Yeah, I don't have the exact answer about it, but just to try and manage that.
Well, I mean, it only really matters on the platform, right? It really, but that's so fucking hard. I mean,
in terms of affecting decisions and affecting training decisions and wanting to go and hit PBs and wanting to put up a post that gets 1,000 likes instead of just something that's boring and
it's gratifying, right?
Yeah, so I understand the.
You're right.
I understand the want behind it and the people's desires to do that kind of stuff and the way that it has changed things. And it's our job as coaches to educate and try and set them up for long-term success and not get drawn into that bubble. But it's another problem of today.
Yeah, still hard. Still hard to stop someone from going through that. Like I have clients going down the bodybuilding realm as opposed to, powerlifting. At the end of the day, if someone's squatting 400 kilos, it's hard to be able to say like, oh, that wasn't 400 kilos, and yes, there's the whole like, oh, was it to depth or whatever. But when it comes to bodybuilding, you can portray yourself through photos in such a different aspect to what you actually look like in real life. So it's hard as a physique competitor to be able to go, oh shit, this person looks so much leaner. It's like, maybe they've just like had the right lighting, had the right positions and stuff like that. But that really influences people's decision making throughout the course of a prep as well. So yes, I've just had a lot of people literally just turn it off and step away from it because they know the negative influences that has on them throughout the course of a prep. So I think that's a really positive thing is being able to step away and understand yourself better and go, all right, I know this is a trigger for me and this is a problem. How do I manage this? Is it stepping away from it for the course of, 6 or 12 weeks or something like that while I go through a more stressful period in my life? And that brings them out in a more positive headspace in a time that's probably quite stressful. So it's just being able to understand what your triggers are, and if that's an influencer for negativity, then maybe step away from it and don't have a problem with being able to step away from that as well.
This as a strength coach is quite multidisciplinary, isn't it?
Yeah, I was literally about to say that. Like, you're not just throwing programs out there, right? Like,
one thing I always try to define is like how much of it is our role, because we're diving into so many disciplines, and it can get, we can dive down to psychology, but how far down the psychology route are we going to go before they need a real therapist?
Yeah,
or and just in many aspects. I mean, how far down the rabbit hole would you say? Like, do you have cases at the point where you just refer off to?
Yes. Myself as a nutritionist, it's hard as a strength coach or when you're doing the programming. People don't necessarily always expect the psychological aspect out of their coach. But when it comes to nutrition, because really like when you're training maybe 3, 4, 5 times a week. So the only time you're really thinking about training is on your training days. When it comes to nutrition, you're thinking about nutrition as soon as you wake up. You're thinking about food from breakfast, and if there's been a stressful day at work, you're thinking about like, what am I going to use to make myself feel better, and generally that comes with food. So as a nutrition coach, I feel like a lot of what I handle is psychological things and like behavioral traits and stuff like that, as opposed to actually implementing like nutritional interventions. So it's managing people's behavior and managing stress. And there's certain things that I can employ as a coach that will help people through that from a performance standpoint, and also for people that just want to, feel good and look good naked. But there is a point where I start to recognize certain traits within people after a period of time of working with someone where I have no problem with referring out and saying, look, there's a way that you need to have this conversation with a client, and I think a lot of that comes down to the relationship that you initially have with them and the trust that you build in that relationship as well. But I have no problem with being able to say to someone, hey, look, unfortunately, this is outside of my scope of practice. My practice is to help you employ better nutritional behaviors. What you're dealing with right now is more than what I can help you with, and there are certain people that I think you need to invest your time and money in. That's probably not me, because what you're dealing with right now is outside of my depths, and I've done what I can to help you through this, and I hope that you found this an educational process. and you've learned a lot about yourself throughout this time, but I think now is maybe a time that you invest. And I've personally seen psychologists in the past, and I feel now I have better self-awareness because I understand what my triggers are and what I need to do to help myself through those. But a lot of people think like you're almost broken if you have to go see someone for your mental health. I think mental health is just
the stigma it has.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I need to see a therapist. It's like, well, no, don't necessarily look at them as a therapist for, you know, a broken brain or something like that, because that's not the problem at all. But a lot of, I have a lot of people that I would refer out to for a variety of different things, whether it comes from self-respect or an empowerment, to just seeking help for deeper trauma-based problems that need addressing. And a lot of the people that have come out of that in a much, much, much better mind space, where now what I'm implementing is working and we're having consistency in what they're doing and they're enjoying it.
I think this comes down to some of the philosophies I've read in both you guys' profiles, is the very holistic approach to addressing issues, not just in the foundations of health, but the foundations of mental health and of physiology and muscular development and behaviors and all matter.
It's comprehensive and it can be draining, but it's enjoyable as well when you see people come out with the results that they're after.
That's the key. I guess that's the key for real success, right? Like you can't just be coached in one area of your life. Like I've had therapy. I know heaps of people, and it was awesome for me. And I saw it as a mindset coach, because that's what it was. It literally was, you're thinking of shit this way, let's reframe how you think stuff. And like it's almost something you should look at the start of the journey, rather than, oh fuck, I'm broken, now I need fixing. It should be like, super elite athletes will generally have sports psychology assistants, right, at the start of the journey. I mean, not everyone can fund that, obviously, but it goes hand in hand.
There's a lot of free information out there anyways, though. I mean, obviously it's very personal and contextual, so you definitely need someone to help you through that. But there are different interventions that we can do as a coach, like motivational interviewing and behavioral monitoring, and there's a lot of different things that you can go down that I'm personally not extremely well versed in, but I understand some of the fundamentals around it that can help people. And like I said, at the end of the day, I have no problem with referring outwards. And I think it makes you a better coach to be able to say, look, I don't have my hands in 50 buckets. I have my hand in one bucket or two buckets. And I think if you want to truly help people, have no problem with, referring out.
I think maybe change topics a little bit, and I think a very popular topic is programming, competition preparation, and I guess some of the approaches we might take with that, because we have all the holistic stuff, and that builds a good foundation. But in the end, then you got the health, and then you got to move on to a point. We got to move on to performance. Yeah, I mean. So I guess what are some of the first strategies when it comes to some of your most elite guys? What's your first? I guess how do you plan out your first? What do you do? How do you plan out your first prep with someone or coming into a competition? Let's say someone like Keita, right? And you've got multiple competitions coming up. You got Pro Raw, then you'll have Wildcats, and then all these huge competitions. What are some of the strategies you start to put in place, I guess, with periodization and programming and conversations you start having with these people about getting them
ready?
Yeah.
Keita's already pretty ready and motivated. I don't think motivation is really an aspect that we need to have with her, but...
Example, and any of your top level guys.
Geez, it's, so massive, but... Yeah, but just first of all, like at 12 weeks out, we want to have we want to be ready to compete. Like as we said right at the start, there's a lot of sacrifice in life, and physically a massive toll, mentally a massive toll. I really think for people to succeed at that kind of level, like they need to be ready. Like you need to come in at 12 weeks and be ready to give all that kind of stuff, and you have to have some momentum built from your off season. You have to be already picking up the little wins. You have to be already heading in the right direction. And then it's easy. Then it's just specificity. Then it's just like, okay, now we're going to bring in some comp variations. Now we're going to start hitting the heavier reps. Now we're going to start hitting things more frequently, start building the efficiency and the skill side of things as opposed to the hypertrophy and the GPP sort of side of things.
How close to ready do you think they'll be? About 12 weeks? Would you have them ready? Like, or ready, let's say, if they were to...
They still haven't hit, for most of my people, like I said, for if I talk about myself, like I personally I find that the comp variations beat me up a fair bit, and I personally stay away from like the exact competition variations for a fair while, probably closer than what most people do to competition. So at 12 weeks out, I'm still hitting a fair variety of on the big three. Like I'm not really hitting comp bench. I'm not really hitting comp wrapped squats. I'm not kind of hitting that level of specificity yet. And I'll still be building in a general sense at that point. And then it won't be until kind of 6-8 weeks that I'll be really hitting the heavies and the comp variations and stuff like that. I guess that comes down to me having quite a history now, and I kind of know how to do those lifts, and the skill comes back quicker than somebody else perhaps. I know what to expect. I know how to like flip the switch mentally. I know how to do that stuff, so I can probably get away with it a little bit longer. But I know that if I start pushing it from 12 weeks, 15 weeks, like I might do with somebody else, like I just end up kind of getting beat up, and then by the time I get to 6 weeks out, I'm kind of, my knees hurt a little bit, my elbows hurt a little bit, my shoulders hurt a little bit, and back's beat up. Like I start running into those little niggly things that come with prep too early. And
how would you go about figuring out what kind of strategy we're going to take into? How many different types of strategies would you come in with athletes, and how would you figure that one out with some individuals? Just
figuring out in the opposite, as in like taking data, taking training volume, taking training intensity in general, looking at planning different variations, seeing how it affects somebody, how it beats them up, what they respond to, and then just kind of building a profile in that sense, and then knowing kind of what works in a general sense. I know that what works now isn't going to work then, but like building a kind of a profile on that and then being able to take that forward. It's all built around those principles. It's not so much like this is exactly how I'm going to do it, because obviously it's going to be situational. It's going to be on the person and on the
like we've gathered over the years of working with someone like Keita that she can handle quite a bit of training volume.
She knows how to work.
She knows how to work, and I think that comes from a bodybuilding history, much like Adam Wright as well. Like he knows how to work hard and push hard throughout a session. He gets through those sessions relatively quickly, but it's the ability
to back from injuring themselves more than anything. Yeah,
but maybe going down a route of learning to express that skill in a better way. Learning how to hit those, 1RM heavy numbers. It is a skill to do a 1RM. And I know when Adam did his first prep with Will, I think it was from about 12 or 13 weeks out that he was doing singles. And it wasn't singles in a heavy regard. Like I think he was maybe doing like
3-4 reps from failure.
Yeah.
Well, he was a bodybuilder. He's a good example of almost the opposite end of the spectrum to me. So he had a bodybuilder. He had a big base. He had a big. He's jacked. He's jacked. Yes, he's got a lot of he's got a lot of muscle. He knows how to put in effort. Like he knows how to go hard when he needs to go hard. But he was doing like sets of 10, 8 on squats at like ridiculous numbers. Like I was like, holy fuck, this guy's a monster. But then when you hit a 1RM, it would be, he'd be worrying about, holy crap, this is fucking heavy, and he'd be shaky, and he couldn't control it, and there was a lot of like the skill aspect missing. So, like Mikki said, there was a less of an emphasis on kind of building and more of an emphasis on just expressing that strength. So we were hitting singles, doubles, triples, a little bit away from failure, obviously, much further from comp than what I would ever do, because I would just I would crash and burn. But he was hitting them. He was hitting a lot of tempo work. He was hitting a lot of pause work. So there was a huge emphasis on skill, a huge emphasis on efficiency, and not so much emphasis on building strength in a typical.
So I think knowing a athlete's history, training history, is really, really important in determining what style that you're going to take them into in their competition prep. Like if we have someone like Will coming on board who has a large training history and knows how to express that skill in a 1RM fashion quite well, then you're not going to be starting them hitting
a bit beat up.
Yeah, you're not going to be starting them hitting heavier singles earlier in the prep. You're going to, like we'll say, go through different variations.
You want to, like I said, you want to program for the person, not program for what I like programming.
Yeah, exactly. I find personally with myself now is that I try and that final peak phase is like really, they're getting shorter and shorter for me. Like I remember over the years.
That's what I just said, is like you pick it up quicker as you get better.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, I know after a couple of weeks of heavy singles, I'm back to being pretty confident, and you know those heavy numbers, and they come back pretty quick. Like I know I'll come under a bar and something, you know 300 will feel pretty fucking damn average, but then usually like second or third week they're like
flows
skyrocketing. It's like
Yeah,
it's all back again. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Have you found that with someone like Sarah, for example, like throughout her prep?
So we've actually
different approaches you've taken?
It's funny, we've actually over time we've been able to train actually do less and less work, where before we would have quite a bit of volume to make progression, and now she's been getting more results from just doing less work. So we used to squat twice a week. Now we're back down to once a week, and she's been getting more out of that. And even now, as far as we've gone down, pretty much just focused on like 4 sets of squats a week, and she's just responding so damn well. But she also squats so damn much.
Yeah.
You know.
It beats you up, and that's another thing I guess you need to take into consideration as a coach is as someone gets stronger, their ability to recover after those sessions, like, 300 kilos versus 200 kilos is very different on someone's back. And so how is their ability to recover after those sessions and perform again going into their next session? Like it's very common that after someone does a heavy squat or something like that, maybe their shoulders or their elbows are a little bit pissy, and how do they go into their next bench session after that? So I guess taking all that training history into consideration will allow you to apply different principles.
I think this is where separates again the good coaches and the bad coaches. Trying to force an athlete into a program compared to adjusting a program to someone's their adaptability, their psychology, their lifestyle.
Yeah,
I think that's where
like a lot of people rip on like cookie cutter template programs and stuff like that, but there's always a place for those. I think for certain people.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're doing powerlifting. It's 3 lifts.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all going to look kind of similar. But yeah, having a template or a structure or a system or whatever you want to call it, and then just changing,
molding it to the person.
Yeah, molding it, like little variations here, changing the volume up, down, intensity up, down, whatever.
Yeah, it always essentially looks the same. I mean,
Yeah.
we follow like 2 or 3 different structures, and then it's just really a adjustment, volume, intensity,
and what they want, what they
want,
like, what they like. Yeah, I think that's important because let's be honest, like powerlifting is boring. It's boring to compete in, and it's boring to watch sometimes as well. So I guess
boring to train for.
So you've got to keep some kind of enjoyment in there, and obviously there is a point where it's like, all right, look, you are competing and you're 6 weeks out, and we just need to do the bloody work. But I know, like in one of Will's pro roll preps, I think he only squatted like 3 or 4 times going into that prep as well, because he was just like, you're facing a lot of knee problems.
It was my knee. I think that was pro. Damn, I forget which comp that was.
Pro or 9. It was pro or 9 that you were going into that. Because I remember we were training out of Zero Gym here.
Yeah, it was. And that was actually one of my best comps. You're right. Yeah, because I came into Pro Raw 9 with my left knee really angry for some reason. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't get a handle on it in the time frame I needed to, like further away from comp. So I had to deal with it during prep, which is never a good idea because you can't really take weeks off, and you can't really change. You can't really just not squat because I'm going to have to do that in comp. But we had to take like a week on, week off approach, and really low volume, and just kind of like squatting just enough to keep the skill. I guarantee there was no progression in terms of like hypertrophy or like strength in an overall sort of sense, but like just enough to keep the skill and peak the skill and do enough to get into comp and hit the 3 white lights.
I think it's funny you say that because like I've come across I guess myself and with some other athletes is you start to work out that minimum effective amount that you come into competition, and I've worked out it can be very little.
It's so much less than what you think. Yeah, absolutely.
It can be nothing, and you're still express. You can just look at refining just the tiniest skill, and that is all you can focus on with such minimal work. I think I got away with one of my girls, and I find girls, especially really small ones, generally don't get away with it as much, but one of my girls really did. She was like 52 kilos, and she had back pain, so we just did singles. It was like one single only. I think most went to 90%, and we bested by 2.5 kilos, and that's all we did for like 8 weeks, and then it was everything else that didn't hurt.
Yeah.
That's what I was about to say. There's probably other things in the program which overlapped to some degree, but didn't hurt. So it might be like like if your elbows and your shoulders are playing up, it might be that you just do a bent bar or a safety bar or a cambered bar or something like that just doesn't put as much pressure on the shoulder, but it's still a squat. It's still similar enough to get some transition, or the same on bench, same on deadlift. There's variations which you can do to work around it. There's other ways you can get work in. But you're right, you can get away so little. When I went to America and did that comp there recently and hit
12
my
months
best
ago
number
recently.
in November last year.
Well, that's recently. For the moment, isn't
In
it?
terms of, coronavirus has shortened the spectrum. But for that, I trained hard. We did a kind of a hard prep up until 6 weeks out, which is when I flew over there. And then for that last 6 weeks, when I was over there, because of the travel and the lack of food and everything that we did, we were hitting 3 sessions a week where it was literally just the comp lifts to a very low volume, and then maybe 1 or 2 accessories when I had the time. And I came in and hit some of my best numbers, you know what I mean? So I'm not saying that is the approach that I wanted to take, but that was enough to keep the skill that I had, the strength that I had built prior to going there. So yeah, you're right. I completely agree. The more and more I do it, the less I find I kind of need to do. It's interesting. And I guess that's the biggest discoveries I've been making over the last few years is sometimes less is so much better. And if you can build on something very little and then just make adjustments from the smallest amount, the progressions of my athletes have been absolutely crazy, especially with Sarah. Sarah's a good one to use because when someone's really, really elite, you can really see the difference between something that does and doesn't work. And doing less has been hands down. Quality over quantity.
Yeah.
How did you handle like Keita's prep going into Wildcats?
I forget now. That was
like
a while ago.
she still like handles quite a bit of volume like training. Like she asks for more sometimes, and it's like I think that comes back to like the bodybuilding history as well. It's like being able to say like, no, we need to slow this down and control it a little bit. But she handled quite a bit of like volume throughout that prep. But I guess that's just the difference in the athlete.
Mindset, though, those with bodybuilders. I mean, one of my athletes trained at Worlds and was talking to some bodybuilder, and it's like he was shocked looking at his program. It's like, how do you get away with doing so little? You're just doing 3s and 4s, and because they're just not used to seeing.
Well, are they scared to lower the volume? Do you think it's that versus they?
It's just what they're used to. In bodybuilding, they're going to be hitting. I'm going to throw numbers out there, but most of my bodybuilders are hitting 80, 90, 100, 110, 120 sets of just working sets of everything per week, which is a fair bit. When you start to get up to the 100, it's a fair bit over 5-6 days. Whereas if I'm hitting one of my programs, if I added up my total working sets, it'd be like in a prep maybe 50, 60 sets over a week of everything, including like the little stuff. But that work is much more intense. Like it's squatting, it's benching, it's deadlifting, it's heavy.
I think the feeling's different too. Like, the fatigue from bodybuilding and the fatigue from powerlifting are just like different. Like you come out of, so I did bodybuilding back in I competed in 2012 in bodybuilding, and it is you have the muscle fatigue and you have, the cardiovascular system going, and then so with powerlifting, I guess, you get heavy enough.
The food.
And then, but you come out with this different type of fatigue. It's just like, especially when I feel like going heavy a lot, this underlying fatigue, not just fatigue from a training session, but it's just like could fall asleep.
Yeah.
You know, it's just this different.
Just mentally drained.
Yeah.
Exhausted.
It's funny how they're both fatiguing, but they just feel completely different.
It's harder to manage in powerlifting because we're all three lifts, although, you know, people will see squatting as a leg exercise and bending as a chest exercise or whatever. Like, we know that, you know, when you're doing correctly, it's a whole body lift. All three are a whole body lift.
Of course, yeah.
Massive amount of attention being put through everything. And so you can't really like train your legs one day and then let them recover and train arms or something. Like you can do in bodybuilding, you can split it a little bit more. You can handle the
avoid
fatigue
certain things
better, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can handle it to a certain point, and then in prep you're just like fatigued all the time, and that's just because you're so depleted. You're so, you know, there's such little going in to actually promote recovery that it's just a matter of getting through the sessions in the volume that you actually can.
It's different.
Yeah.
Completely different. What's next for you guys coming into?
It's hard to say right now with the world how it is, but as an athlete, I want to compete early next year, some point. I'm just waiting to see what comps happen, whether Pro Raw happens, whether Arnold's Arnold's will happen.
I got a feeling that's. I mean, Melbourne's a bit.
Well, I doubt Arnold's will happen, being an expo and being what it is. But hopefully Pro Raw goes ahead at the gym back like it was at Pro Raw 7 and before.
I feel like it'll almost be a Pro Raw 7 repeat, where it'll probably be majority Aussie lifters because internationals will kind of be limited. So I think it'll go back to sort of PTCHQ Pro Raw 7 days, which was a really fun comp.
Yeah, I like it.
It's really enjoyable.
I prefer it.
Yeah,
as
less hype.
I would prefer, I prefer it on a lifter selfish point of view because I feel like I can perform better in those circumstances. But in terms of a promotional view, different. It's either that or a states comp here if we're restricted to Queensland. I'd love to go and do overseas. I really wanted to compete in Miami with the hybrid crew, but I think that's probably a dream at this point. That's probably well off. And in terms of Nexus as a business and where we're going with that, trying to head down the educational hole a bit more. We'll always have our athletes, we'll always be coaching, we'll always do that stuff. But I really want to get into mentoring other coaches or educating other coaches, bringing out products, things like that, to educate. And that's kind of what we're trying to do now. We're just in the process of building the back end, the systems for all that stuff, setting up for that stuff, writing content, doing all that.
The last thing you want to do is release a product and then change the way that you deliver it, or something like that. Like that's the process that we're going through right now. Is like the way that we've got everything set up, and then it's like, oh wait, no, there's going to be another way to deliver this that's easier for the user and for us as well. So why create everything now only to then have to transition the way that we do it? So just getting all of that set up, I suppose, at the moment.
So are you guys thinking of an online platform kind of situation?
There's many options there. Courses, different small short courses, covering all that we've talked about and more. And then a mentorship itself, as in like the same thing, but everything, and with me actually interactive with people, asking questions and doing stuff like that. It's a bit of a different thing. And then stuff on the nutritional side of things, big push for content on that. And
a membership site
potentially
just as a way, as a platform for everything that we already have created behind the scenes, and just putting it in a one space for people to have access to. Obviously, we have a great team of coaches that work with us. It's not just myself and Will. We have two other coaches, Zach and Max, that are unfortunately stuck down in Melbourne. But it means they're at home and they have a little bit more time, I suppose, to do some of the things that they enjoy doing in terms of education and that sort of stuff. So, I guess it's just utilising this time for what it is. And only a few short months ago, Will and I just bought a house down on the Gold Coast, so that was quite a stressful couple of months sorting out that process, which you like to think is a relatively easy thing, but we didn't necessarily have the best ride of the process going through. The sellers were a little bit difficult, so there's just a lot of different things that have kind of gone on behind the scenes as well. But
That's another thing I really want to get into is with the purchase of the house, we built the home gym. If you follow me on social media, you would have seen it. The process of setting that up. So I've nearly got everything in there. There's a few more pieces to go in over the next, hopefully, few months. Trying to make it look all pretty because I kind of want to turn that into like a media hub type thing.
Yeah.
People are always asking for like a vision of myself, like how I train and how I do exercise and things like that. So trying to turn that into that sort of place where I can film everything. Because I already train, I already do it, and I already know why I'm doing it. So to stand and put a camera up and film that and then explain to the camera why I do it, I think it won't be overly difficult. And I think, people keep asking for it and they want to see it. So that's another step in terms of that front as well.
It's the way to do it. I mean, you're making a similar transition. I think previously it used to be, as we discussed before, it used to be own a gym, right? The step up in the business side was own a gym, branch out that way. Now it's like, you want to move away from one-to-one interaction all the time to how can we affect 50, 100, 1,000 people, but only actually record the content once and then facilitate that, right? Because we've had long discussions about the issues with owning a gym.
We talked to Fuzzy about this and how gyms have how the powerlifting, I guess, market has started to change. Where it was a pop-up shed gyms, and you could just have bring in heaps of members, and you could get away with having this small to medium size gym. But they've started to take two very different directions now. Now you got your dominant powers who run competition and have huge gyms, can cater for a large number of people because it's becoming quite a general population type sport now, where a lot of people are starting to take it up. And then you have your medium-sized gyms, which are dying out, which is unfortunately where I was stuck in. And then you got the other part where now it's coaches who are keeping to a very small studio where they manage their people in there and try to outreach from something small.
Not as much overheads with it.
Yeah. And I think it's the two directions they're going. They go into those two extremes.
Well, we were training at a facility. Obviously, we train out of Will trains out of Zero Gym on the Gold Coast, which is pretty much the only powerlifting gym on the coast. I feel like powerlifting in the Gold Coast is still quite small in terms of like actual competitions and competitive athletes, and a lot of people do it as like hobbyists. So there's other facilities on the Gold Coast that are now operating with small amounts of powerlifting equipment. Like some people have the little mono attachments, some people have like a competition bench or a deadlift bar, but you're still quite limited. And at the end of the day, like I don't think you can really beat the culture that some of those smaller facilities really do create. And that's where Thomas is doing quite well with his space, is that he has the culture and you're surrounded by people that know what they're doing and they're experienced in the sport. So if you really want to take it in a more competitive route, then those are the places that you go to. But more so from the hobbyist place. So I think actually putting it in commercialized facilities is probably a good thing for the sport because it opens people up to the exposure of the sport and getting them into it, which at the end of the day is then growing federations. And I think that's as a good thing. And as you know, like as the federations grow and as the sport grows, then those other facilities hopefully start to grow as well. And maybe that's where those pop-up gyms are kind of coming from, because the general population is getting more interest in the sport.
Yeah.
And that's then leading them to those specialized facilities to get more tailored coaching around what they want to do. So it's a good and bad thing in the sense that, some of the gyms are dying, but then some of them are still doing quite well because of the communities that they're creating within their space.
It's definitely got to grow in a way where it's better to grow in a way that reaches more and more people.
Definitely.
I believe it may kill some other businesses along the way, but I mean, in the long run, it's what's going to help our business too.
Yeah, definitely. The more exposure you can get, the more people
get exposed to powerlifting, and the more opportunity they'll seek expert advice.
Yeah, definitely.
To people like us.
Well, so. I think my observations, like when I started going to the gym, fucking whenever I did, like the general population was just bodybuilding, right? Everybody just wanted to get jacked. That was the only reason you went to the gym. Like normal people are now leaning towards strength now a lot more. Like the average person's doing it now, whereas obviously it used to be the kind of weirdo in the corner with all the fucking chalk.
Like that's just powerlifting in general. It's evolved. Yeah. It's evolved as well. Yeah. Like if you look at the guys who are at the top of the pyramid now, the guys who are winning Pro Raw or the guys that are winning IPF Worlds or whatever, they're all jacked. Like it's changed from the guys where powerlifting was, where it was, West Side days where there was just a big fat guy in a suit.
Yeah.
It's not so scary anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The women are, attractive or not. I mean, not to be like discriminative in any ways, but they're not all portrayed as like Lyndall Vile, for example, is a great example that a lot of people like to use as someone that's still quite feminine in the sport. So it's not to say that, they're all big, butch, scary looking girls or something like that. So it's also enticing a lot more women into the sport as well. And that's just one example of many, which I think is a good thing, for the sport. Like it's a very welcoming, warm environment, which is always a good thing. Like unlike, my first competition in bodybuilding, I walked out the back. I wasn't allowed to walk out the front and watch all the girls on stage. I actually got in trouble because I stood off the side and I was watching the girls on stage performing, like the figure girls, which I'm a bikini model, but I find the figure girls and physique girls much more interesting and enjoyable because I respect the work that goes into getting that lean and getting that jacked. But I got in trouble for cheering them on and standing off the side because I was meant to be out the back. But when I was out the back, I was completely ignored. Like I wasn't in with a clique. I didn't know any of the girls there. Like no one came up to me and said, "Hey, who are you? Where are you from?" Whereas in powerlifting, like if you look lost out the back, 9 times out of 10, someone who's experienced is going to come up to you and welcome you and help you through it. Like if someone's, warming up on a monolift, they'll call out to you, "Hey, are you using this? Do you want to jump in here yet? Like what weight do you want? Let me load the bar for you." Like it's a really warm and welcoming environment. I think that's a really positive thing as well. So
I remember my first comp. That's like after the first one, I was hooked. I think you were there. 2015 Queensland States.
Yeah.
I believe you would have. I'm sure you were training there, and I'm sure you would have been coaching that day. I remember it's
all competing
a while ago. All competing, one of the two. But I remember, in particular, I remember having done a couple of years of bodybuilding before that, and I did that first comp, and then the fact that I was obviously trying to win and trying to beat other people, and I remember the Les Rowe was coming second to me and he was like cheering me on, and then Critter and all these other boys were like trying to G me up and help me get through it, even though it was my first comp and no one knew who the hell I was. I thought that was awesome because it was such a different contrast to bodybuilding in my experience anyway. Yeah. So that hooked me straight up.
Definitely a big thing that hooked me too. It was just
the atmosphere in your gym was like that. Like if you fucking saw the people. I remember the first time I went in there and I went in to shoot some content for you. I remember the first time going in, seeing, and if you saw them in the street, you'd be like, "Fuck, they're intimidating people. They're all fucking big, strong, like." But then when you get into the gym, it's fucking awesome. The feeling in the gym, the vibe in the gym is just fucking friendly. Everybody's cheering each other on. There's like, it felt like a team atmosphere. And obviously, it was a team atmosphere, right? But it's different. It's different. Like, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one thing that we're really big on within Nexus as well. It's just the community aspect and the culture that we have. Obviously, we don't have a gym and we don't have the opportunity to expose 10, 20, 30 people at one time to the environment that we want them in. Right. So we try and create that in a different facet. We, we have an online community group within all of our athletes and non-athletes. Like we coach many people that aren't competitive powerlifters or bodybuilders and they just want to get strong and look good and feel good. And so we try and create that positive culture in a different way. So whenever we go to events like Pro Raw or States or whatever it may be, any small powerlifting competition, if we have a handful of people competing, we'll always go out of our way to do dinners and have everyone mingle and meet each other, because they're not exposed to a lot of those people. But if you go to somewhere like down in Sydney or you're traveling somewhere and you want a place to train out of, 9 times out of 10, you're going to go to an environment filled with Nexus athletes because you know who they are and you feel comfortable around them and you want to spend time. And so many of our athletes have never met each other, but as soon as we go and create one of those events, you just see pranks and jokes and, those are the sort of people that we have within our community and within our culture. And I think it's just obviously something that we're quite proud of and something that we want to continue to embed within the way that we deliver our services as well. So yes, it's difficult not having the space to create that, but I still think it's important as a coach or whatever to try and replicate that in some respect.
I think there's Wayne. I think there's a few things on this because I've done both, and there's pros and cons, and then there's understanding your role, what job you want to provide, what services do you want to provide, because I definitely have found, and actually talked about this with Brandon from Kabuki, and it's like I said, there's definitely an aspect to team-based training that has shown more superiority over individualization in programming, because of that general pushing people, because the variable of hard training can sometimes overcome any of the individualized things. They'll overcome their own. They'll get rid of their own biases. They'll get rid of their, they won't be so prancy about some of the little things that are happening. And they generally push harder. And I've had massive superior results with that. But there is a lot of cons to that. I mean, I think definitely from a business owner perspective, there's a lot of sacrifice you have to take. You're heavily involved with those people and maintaining
invested in them
and culture. But then I found on this aspect now pulling myself out of that. What is my role here? And I guess it's similar to what you have been saying. It's like my role now is to educate people. My role now is to provide guidance in the right direction. At the same time, still trying to provide a community of people. But it's no longer my role to be a team-based sport. I can still provide a very high quality service and education. And if anything, I can provide that better now because I'm not just trying to push it to a team of people. It's now to individuals.
Yeah, definitely. But I think, like I know a lot of your athletes will train out of the same space as well, and they know each other, so it allows them to still communicate and train alongside each other and stuff like that as well. And they'll even reach out to each other without having to reach out to you and say, hey, are you training at this time? And let's, go hit this session, or what comp are you doing? And a lot of that comes down to yourself mentoring them as a coach, and making people understand that, put their insecurities aside, so to speak, and look bigger picture and, reach out to other people that may be going through the exact same thing that you're going through and the anxieties of a comp prep or that sort of stuff.
I mean, even if you can have replicate an online community aspect of it where people can throw up personal bests, or even they're comfortable enough to throw up to other athletes in the program that I had a fucking shit session, failed this is going wrong, and everybody picks each other up rather than... I think the problem is people do the same thing with the social media, right? And they get fucking 9 out of 10 comments of fucking, I don't know, you're bouncing, squat depth. Like, everybody's trying to fucking pick you to pieces instead of that team atmosphere where maybe you can replicate that, where you can throw all your shit online and everybody else in the group goes, don't worry about it, keep going, congratulations, that kind of thing.
Like, one thing that we try and do whenever we have a new client come on board, if they feel comfortable to post within this community group and they're like, hey, I'm such and such and this is my history and this is what I do, and maybe they'll upload a photo of themselves or a video of themselves. It's something that we do try and encourage people to do, but every single one of the people within that group, like a large majority of them will comment and be like, hey, how you going? Or like if they actually know each other and they train out of the same facility, like, wait, what are you doing in here, you mongrel? There's always a welcome environment to any new person that comes on board, and there's never ever scrutiny or stuff like that, because that's the coach's responsibility. The coach is the one to, construct and provide the feedback that they really need, and that's who they're investing their time and money in, and that's who they should be listening to. But it's hard also to step, like if you're posting this stuff on social media and you've got 50 other people ridiculing you, it is hard to, not be upset or offended by that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, the coach is who you're investing your time and money and energy into, and that's who you should be listening to the most.
That's awesome, man.
There's always so much about even, how you bring someone on board or the reasons for someone to come and see you in the first place. I always found, I've always never tried to force sales to go clients, or I say like they come to me with the problems, like, here's how I can help. I mean, there are plenty of other people that can do the same thing, but the thing is, if you get that person who's I think that's the first thing you're trying to find the right client is that they already have that level of motivation themselves and intrinsic motivation themselves, because I've had people on different spectrums when you get someone who doesn't have any of that, they're looking for a personal trainer. I'm just not gonna
hold your hand. Yeah.
So I think that's just again, always keep saying is defining the coach's role.
Yeah.
You know, how far down a rabbit hole do you want to go with some things, and you know, because where we're crossing the boundary in some aspects when it comes to psychology, even drug use.
Yeah. Obviously, it contributed to the sport in some respect.
We had a little interesting conversation. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, do you want to go there? Yeah, let's go there. We've been going an hour. This is awesome.
I guess we had before we started this podcast, we had a little conversation about, and it's always a taboo topic, and it's something that in the strength community and the strength coaches that we end up having to deal with. There's no choice around it. When you have an athlete who's at an elite level, or who's just that type of personality type who is going to do it anyway, what are your guys, I guess, approach and views or roles that you guys take when it comes to people who's highly competitive? Like, I want to take all this stuff, you know, or I'm already taking all this stuff, you know. What's some of your first approaches in dealing with those?
Just knowing that, again, like we were talking before, there's a spectrum of like health and performance, and obviously this stuff is going to work. It can't really not work. It's really good at what it does. It works. Yeah. It's one of the it's good and bad, the parts about it. But there's always a health trade-off, depending on how far you push it. But there is always to some degree, and understanding where somebody wants to be on that. Like, do you want to do this with, a long-term plan and prioritize health? Or do you want to be the guy who's pushing things really, really hard and you're at the top, you know, you want to get there quick or whatever? And there's obviously like there's pros and cons to both approach. It's just like, where do you want to be on that? So like getting understanding exactly their vision and what they want to do, because like there's just not much information. As simple as that. And the people that are giving the information they have no fucking idea what they're doing. They've just been told by their other friend, and then they've just been told by their other friend. So it's a very misinformed, uneducated world. People step into that. So just first of all, getting an idea of where they want to be, what they want to be, understanding that there is going to be pros and cons to this stuff, and they need to understand that first. And I think that's the first thing that we need to define. And then from there, I can help you. Then from there, I can go, or either I can help you with my knowledge on it, and if I don't know, I can refer you to somebody that does. I have a bunch of people that are really well educated, and they kind of deal with this stuff day in, day out. So, yeah, I guess that's really it. As far without going into specifics, but I think people really need to understand that first. They really need to dig deep and figure out what they want.
Why, what the real reason behind.
Yeah, like if you just want to go like, how do I say this? Like a lot of people, like without talking about this specifically, but a lot of people come to me, the first time that we have a consultation, first time I've ever spoken to them, they're like 18 or whatever, you know, like they're raring to go. They're just like, they might have got new beginners. They've been in the gym 2 years and they'll tell me like, yeah, I want to be like the king, you know, like I want to be at the top of the pyramid. Like I want to win this shit. Like I want to conquer the powerlifting world. I want everybody to know my name type thing. And then I'll be like, cool. And then we'll go about things, and 2 months into the process, they're going out and getting pissed on the weekends, and they're missing meals here and they're missing sessions there. And I'm like, how bad do you really want this? Like you're telling me one thing, you're telling me that you're all in, and you're not all in. So I think the drug use and that side of things comes into that as well. Like if you're telling me that you want to be the best, I'm happy to help push in that direction. But if you're not going to give me everything back, I don't want you to be just slamming this stuff to make up for other.
Exactly. I think other people are thinking that like, oh, it's that's going to get me there. But in the end, I've seen people take a fuckload and go nowhere, and I've seen people take fuck all and go real far with it.
Crazy, yeah.
And it's just another little tool amongst all the other million tools that we got to use. Yes, it is an enhancement.
Yeah,
enhancement.
I think there's a really, I can't remember exactly who said it, but there is a famous quote that says, "I've never seen a vial lift anything."
It's Dave Tate. But yeah, it's what you said about you've seen people take a lot, like like obviously I won't mention names or anything like that, but a lot of the people that I do know take the most aren't really at the top. They're kind of like, they're not bad lifters. You can't really be weak, but they're still kind of intermediate and floating about and stuff like that. It's certainly not a shortcut.
And I think that's because they're not, like Will said, taking care of those other very important facets that's going to make this stuff really useful. You know, like if you have shitty nutrition, shitty recovery modalities, then this stuff's not going to work as effectively as what you want it to be working. So I think it's taking that into consideration as well. If you don't have that background set up, then it's not going to, you know, it's going to work, like Will said, but it's not going to work as efficiently as what you would like it to be.
And then you add the female menstrual cycle to that, and that just makes it immensely more complicated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're already dealing with so many other things that testosterone plays a role with, how it affects women's menstrual cycle, and then the health effects that are going to come from that. So sometimes it can end up being just worse. Yeah, doing something, and it's the same thing with guys. If we just don't have the health foundation, I mean, it's almost not useless. You don't say bang for your buck.
Yeah,
you're not gonna get your bang for your buck. So then I find people like you know rather than making progression in their training, they're trying to make progression by taking more.
Definitely. Yeah. That's what I mean. The people that aren't at the top are, in my experience, aren't the ones that are taking the shit tons of it. They're the ones that have built the foundation, the ones that have got the effort and all that crap under control. Like
I find it, we'll call it a diminishing return. I would say, like you get to a certain. Sometimes more is not always better. You get to a dose, and anything more, what you get your 2 or 3% extra out of it, but for this much more side effects that you're gonna get for it. So ends up not being worth it. Especially some of the things like, you know, the things that might affect your sleep, your appetite, and we all know what they are.
But there's pros and cons to it all.
Yeah, it's balancing act. It is just not worth. It's not worth the sacrifice of appetite, especially if you're someone who's going to have to eat, you know, several thousand freaking.
Yeah, 6,000 calories a day to put weight on. Yeah.
It's just not.
Yeah, that'd be. Sounds like fun, but it's fucking hell, isn't it?
Sounds like fun for one day.
It's I hate it.
Yeah,
that's what Sarah said. What's the worst thing about being a powerlifter?
The eating.
Yeah, definitely.
So all that you're talking about, I think, is a symptom of it being in the dark and it just being illegal, bad, and I think this goes across all drugs. I think if it was just like, if everybody knew what it was and it wasn't a stigma, and they actually had all the fucking information out there, then maybe everybody could use it in the right way, and we wouldn't have all the problems that would lead to why it would be illegal.
Or not be using it at all.
Right.
Like there's a lot of people that shouldn't be touching it.
Yeah, and nobody knows what they're doing, right? And that's the dangerous part. Not the things themselves aren't the dangerous part. It's the people fucking doing it wrong because there's nothing out there.
Well, like I said, it's very easy to look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, of course.
Because it works really well.
yeah.
Like at the end of the day.
You see Joe Blow down is looking jacked in a gym. You're like, I'm going to ask him some questions about it because he's big and jacked and obviously must know what he's talking about.
100%.
But there's only a few select group of people that we would really outsource for information on that sort of stuff. And like someone like Broderick Chavez, for example, has got a membership site built purely on topics surrounding this, and obviously many other things that need to be taken into consideration. So some of the things that we will look after with our athletes is coming into a competition, monitoring, you know, certain health aspects and making sure that everything's within the ranges that we expect. Obviously, coming into a competition, certain things are going to escalate. And with that, you just need to be aware of that as a coach and as an athlete, be educated on what side effects that you may be experiencing so you understand what's going on. And then post-competition, getting things like a blood test and getting regular blood tests throughout the year as well, and making sure that all your health markers are within the ballpark that you expect them to be on certain phases of that prep.
It sounds pretty common sense, but a lot of people that come to us don't even have a plan. I'm like, so like, cool, like I could. I'll be like, what are you doing? They're like, yeah, I'm taking this, and this. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, when are you stopping that? And they go, I don't know. Like, when did you start? Oh, I think it was like a few weeks ago. You know what I mean? Like, there was no. When's the last time you got a blood test? I don't know. Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, just some general planning about it would go a long way.
Yeah.
Just knowing when you're going to start, when you're going to finish, the whys, the hows, the like periodization is often said in terms of programming, but periodizing everything together, like making sure training is driving hypertrophy, making sure nutrition is helping that hypertrophy, making sure that the PED side of things is being biased in the way of hypertrophy. Like everything needs to run together in the same direction to get the best results. So,
and you need to map all that out.
I'd be surprised that a lot of people don't plan at all.
I said I've found over the last, especially few years, that was probably one of the biggest things that helped, I guess, me and helping my athletes was bigger and better planning. You know, so I've ended up now, got spreadsheets and of many things coming across there, and how we're going to stage, how the plan's going to look like. Doesn't mean it's always going to be that plan, but you know, just simple that alone allowed you to, I guess, map out when we do hypertrophy phases, when we do skill work, when we take things, when we're going to test things, like even do things like if people are going to take it, they're going to take it. So let's take it at a minimal risk as possible. You know, so you can test. We test different dosages earlier in season, so we know, like, okay, what's effective. And I've remarkably worked out how little, same thing as like with training, how little doses they can get away with. And it's like, if you can get away with that, that's long term, that's going to be better for you.
But from a nutritional standpoint as well, it's understanding what some of the repercussions of these things are as well. So if you're experiencing, weight gains a week or two in, and understanding why that weight is and maybe what that weight is as well, so that you can monitor that over time and monitor whether or not this substance is the right thing for you, for the side effect points. Like you said, if it's not driving the right stimulus that you're looking for, then you need to change it up to something else, or the side effects are a lot more than what you really want to be dealing with. Like I know a lot of people have really negative side effects to one thing that maybe someone else doesn't experience at all. So it's, I guess it's trial and error as well, which is a dangerous thing with these substances, is like, trialing them out and seeing whether or not it works. But I guess that's where the science has kind of fallen short, right? It's not exactly always tested on certain people. It comes down to a more anecdotal point.
I think so. The summarize would be, it's like, define the goal. I mean, behind the use, because, if it's for reasons that aren't intuitive to at least looking after your health, or, there are other means to that goal that you haven't considered first, such as like, I want to be the best powerlifter. Like, have you even trained, or have you done anything, something super simple, such as address your nutrition and, have proper planning with your training? And then it's like, so we got the goal, and then it's like, okay, risks. Have we set up a health plan? Are we measuring markers of health changes? And this is, I think, this is where I put my role into this, is that my role, if athletes are going to take it anyway, if I refuse to, let's say I did refuse to help, they're going to do it anyway. And that's kind of my philosophy behind any, I guess that's behind any drug use. You don't help them, they're going to do it anyway. The war on drugs doesn't work. So it's the same philosophy here, is that my job, I would say my role would be risk management.
Help educate them and help them understand.
Yeah. Because they're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, so I think like Will said at the very beginning is, what is their why in the first place, and making sure that their why aligns with what their goal is. Because if it's coming in with a shitty reason, then maybe you can try delay the inevitable until they have, like you said, those fundamentals under control. And maybe not say like no forever, but just no for right now. And let's get these things under control first, so that in 6 months' time, now the stuff's really going to be beneficial for you. And I think having those conversations, and maybe their mindset will change across those 6 months, because they'll realize that they are being a little bit lazy, or, whatever, and their mindset may change, and they may not come back to that conversation with you in 6 months' time, because they've realized that their progression has massively increased over that time just by managing those things. So
I listened to this podcast, and it was a conversation with Bill Pearl, and he had a little kid that was training with him, and he was getting really, really strong, and kept asking him about, I want to take something, and he just said, no, he can't okay, you're too young. And then eventually because he kept going, it's like, okay, I'm going to give him something. So I gave him some pills, and it was just sugar pills. You know, so there was nearly nothing in it. And he got so damn excited about it.
Did he get stronger?
He got stronger,
Fuck.
he got bigger, he got
That's awesome.
everything you would get out of it. And then right at the end, he told him, just sugar pills. It was all in him the whole time. And I think it's just one of those things people, you know, they're looking for their answer, but it's in them the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, they just...
Well, I always tell people who don't understand what it is, and they just call drug cheats, right? Like the drugs did it. I'm like, they've still got to do the volume. That weight still, like they've built that with the assistance of it, but they didn't shoot up and then add 50 to the total overnight. That doesn't work, right? You still got to do the work in the gym, right?
It's always a hard conversation, that one, because like I don't want to deny it does work. You're going to get bigger and you're going to get stronger. There are studies that prove it really well.
But you've got to get in the gym. You've got to do the work, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it puts you at a greater risk for injuries and stuff like that if you skyrocket that 50 kilos in 6 months or something. Like, you know, there's certain tendons and ligaments and stuff like that haven't quite managed the
I've seen
loads.
that, yeah.
Yes. I think that's the biggest risk that people fall into. It's not so much the other negative side effects. It's the risk of those major injury tears and, you know, career-ending sort of injuries.
Yeah, there's so much emphasis on muscle recovery, but not enough people put into consideration ligament recovery and I don't know if you go as far as bone densities. I mean, I've seen people snap their bones, but who was it? 2017 Nationals.
Sam, is it Sam?
On the bench press.
Oh, was that
Oh, that was Loz.
Loz, yeah.
Snapped her arm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that was scary.
Fuck.
That was
Wasn't there a dude? I saw a video of a dude in Russia.
That was
Recently? Yeah.
Both his knees blew out on the squat, like literally.
That's not
folded. That's just
We don't want to drive that into that. That's because of drug use. That was
no. Of course,
many-
well, I was
No,
just
none
saying
of
that's
that
an
was,
injury,
yeah.
right? But
what happened to
and that's a
everyone.
fucking one-off. That's like a 1 in a million. But
He most likely had some pre-existing stuff, I would say.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that this is
it's nothing to
the
do with drugs. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a bit of a
I just saw
side
it.
tangent. But as we're saying, yeah, like the there's a lot of focus on muscle recovery, but not enough put on some of those other things. And where, I mean, we know that testosterone builds muscle quick and well. And when people go beyond physiological recovery rates of other aspects of their body, then, yeah, we see tremendous injuries. And I've seen it, again, with some of my own athletes or people I've worked with or with other people. So,
Yeah, I guess it's just getting them to slow down a little bit and, like we said, make sure that those basic fundamentals are being catered to first. Like if you're recovering your sleep and your stress management and your nutrition and all that sort of stuff, and just cardio health and all that sort of stuff is being kept under decent control. And then, like you said, as a coach, just being able to tell them to slow down.
yeah, it's just putting in the time, isn't it? Like you can just...
Like you don't want someone to go into a competition. I know there was I think like Dylan Hellriegel going into Pro Raw 11 when he hit that, was it 1,000-pound squat and 900-pound deadlift? Like he probably had a little bit more in those lifts, but that's what he came in for. Like he came in there just to hit those numbers. So as a coach, it's like, all right, we've set these control parameters and, you know, we just want to do a little bit better than last time. We're not going to max out every single time that you step on that platform. Like sometimes as an athlete, if you're going in there to win, then that's what you got to do. But if you're not maybe at that level, then it's just setting like certain little targets and numbers that you want to get them to slowly progress over time, rather than being like, all right, now we're going to add 50 kilos to your total in this 12-week cycle or something. So just setting little control parameters, I think, will help restrain some of the negative side effects affiliated to like ligament tears and stuff like that as well, because obviously they'll want to go full ham on it.
I think I've let some athletes take only see it take about nearly 3 years to really hit their maximum potential. You know, like you said, like I generally treat their first comp as like have fun. You know, enjoy that first comp, and the next comp, can we improve on that? And I always find that their attitude is what changes. I don't have to drive it.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
because they start to enjoy competition after competition.
so many factors. You can't make somebody the best they're going to be in all aspects, in one prep or in 1 year or in like just like teaching somebody the effort, that like how to put in effort every session, how to manage this and how to manage that. There's just too many little things that are just, that someone needs to learn and go through that can be taught. Even if you're the best coach in the world, just can't be like, just development can't happen that quick, because there's a lot of things that you can't control. Like you need to let a person experience and just get better, whether it's competing, whether it's, like I said, just literally putting in effort. Like I can program you, hey, Gus, I want you to hit a set of 3 at RP8 or 2 reps and failure or whatever like that. Like it's the ability for you to do that is a skill. Like you need to learn to push yourself like that. You need to learn to flip the switch to do it. Like there's some of those things you can't teach. It
takes experience.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I think that those athletes take 3-4 years to really stride in their prime.
It really helps to have a background in something that completely different conversation. But I really think that people that have an athlete background, whether it's some level of sport, like there's many examples of it, like Odell, like coming from an NRL background. Like I really feel like that is a big part of why he's been so goddamn good at what he is, because not only the elite coaching that he would have had in the NRL and the elite development, but just him learning to push and just become an athlete in the holistic,
the general sense.
Like the mindset and everything that comes with being just an elite athlete.
Just being exposed
He's already
to
got that. And then he just had to come in and he's like, fuck, you want me to, what? I just got to squat bench deadlift. Like,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, of course.
like, you know what I mean? That's fucking easy. So, like I really do feel that's a whole other conversation. I could talk for another hour or 2 hours on that, but yeah.
Fuck, we've been going an hour and 25.
Better leave that one there, because we do have another one.
We've got someone locked outside.
Are they outside?
I don't know.
Taking the door down.
Cool.
Well, thank you guys for coming on. That was a
fucking epic, yeah.
We had an hour conversation before this. That would have been good. Some of that stuff would have been good on here too. So
That's all right.
Maybe another time.
Next time. We're not far.
All right. Thank you guys.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you.